Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Mustafa. In this series of tutorials, I'm going to be showing you how you can create a simple web application using Flask framework. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video. So let's get started. First of all, what is Flask? Flask is a web development framework that is based on Python. So it uses Python programming language, and it will help you create a complete website or web application super easily without having to create everything from scratch, because it takes care of a lot of things. And by the way, this framework is very light, so it's not heavy on your machine, and also it's very simple to learn, and the amount of code that you need to type in order to create a simple web application is very small compared to other web frameworks. So let's get started. First of all, we need to install Flask. So first of all, of course, you need to have Python on your operating system, whether you are using Mac or Windows. You need to install Python, and if you don't know how to install Python, you need to go back to my channel, and you will find a tutorial where I teach you how you can install Python on your operating system. And now that you have Python installed, after you make sure that Python is installed, you need to install Flask. So to install Flask, you need to open up your terminal in Mac, or you need to open up CMD in Windows if you are using Windows. And then you need to type pip3 and then install, because I'm using Python 3. pip3 install and then Flask. And this is going to install Flask on your operating system. And since I have already installed Flask, it's going to say here requirement already satisfied. And now we are good to go. So I'm going to be using Sublime. I'm going to open Sublime Text, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop. So I'm going to create here a new folder on my desktop, and I'm going to name it here Flask. Let me name it Flask. And then I'm going to open it in Sublime. And then in Sublime, I'm going to create my first file here, new file. And I'm going to name it, let me zoom in. I'm going to save it as, index.py. So this is our main file, index.py. And as you can see, the extension, as you can notice here, the extension is py because this is a Python file. And then click on save. And now we have our file. So now that we have our first Python file, what we need to do is that we need to import Flask. So I'm going to import Flask here by saying from Flask, and then import Flask. So from Flask module or web framework, I want to import Flask class. And then we need to create a here it should be Flask. This must be capital, the F must be capital, and then we need to create an object from this Flask. So I'm going to create here an object, Flask, and this is our main object that's going to kind of create and let us continue with the process of creating the web application. So here Flask, and then it takes here a parameter, and that parameter is just double underscores, and then name, and then double underscores. And then I'm going to store that in a variable called app is equal to Flask. And then at the end of our script, we need here to say if, and then double underscores, and then double underscores, and then in between name, if that name is equal to double quotes, and then double underscores, and then main. If that is true, then app.run. So this, if that is true, then we are just gonna run our application, and you don't have to worry about this. This is just some kind of a housekeeping stuff in order to make our application work successfully. So again, let me walk you through what I have done. What I have done is that I just imported Flask, and then I have just created an object, and then here I'm just checking if the application, if the name is equal to the main, then I just need to run our application. That's it. And in between here, goes our code. So here our code. So we create an object, we make sure that the name is equal to main, and then we run our application, and here in between we type our logic, our code. So the first thing that we need to do in order to work with Flask, you need to know two things. The first thing is, whenever you want to create a web page, you need to create what's called a root. And what a root is that it's just a URL. So a root is just a URL. A URL such as /, let's say search, or / sports, or / tech, anything. It can be anything, but it's just a URL. And of course, before that / search or / sports, goes the domain name. For example, Google / search or Google / sports. So a root is just a URL. And whenever we want to create a web page, we need first to create a root. You need to remember this. So how can you create a URL or root in Flask? Well, you need to use this syntax first, at app dot root, and then you specify here you specify the root, your root that you want to create. For example, it can be / and then sports or search, and for the home page it's just /. And then whenever you have the second thing here, let me type 2. The second thing is that whenever you have a root, there must be a function. So a function must go with that root, because once you have a root, a function must be executed in order to do something. It can return a web page, it can just do something in the background, it can just solve a mathematical equation or anything, but there must be here a function. So second thing that you need to create is a function. So a function goes here, def, and then the name of the function, let's say main, and then this function, as I told you, it can do anything. It can just return a string. You can here say this is a web app. That's it. It can return something. It can do anything. But in this example, I'm just returning a simple string. Now that we have our first root and our first function, we need to run our application. So I'm going to run our application. I'm going to open up my terminal, and then I'm going to head on over to the desktop, because my application on the desktop, and then I'm going to head on over to Flask, cd and then Flask, and then I'm going to run my application, python3, and then the name of the file, which is index.py, this file that I want to run, index.py. So here python3 and then index.py, and then hit enter. And what this is going to do is that it's going to just run and deploy my web application on my local server. So it's going to tell you here running on, and then your local server. My local server is this one, 127, and then the port is 5000. So you need to copy it and head on over to your browser, and then in the browser you need to paste that URL and hit enter. And guess what? This is going to return this simple string. As you can see, this is a web app, which is this is a web app. So it returned a simple string here in our browser. So now that I have created the first root here, we need to return another type of data. Instead of returning here a string, let's return something else. Let's return For example, here let me return a dictionary. So I'm going to return here a dictionary, and that dictionary can be anything. Let me say here website, and that website is my website, commoncode.com. And by the way, if you did not visit my website, I'd highly recommend visiting my website and check out my courses. There are a lot of courses and a lot of useful courses, and I'd highly recommend checking out these courses. And also you'll find a lot of materials and articles, very useful articles. So this is a simple dictionary. You can return it. And let me copy this dictionary and store it in a variable. So I'm going to copy it and store it in a variable here called website, and then it's going to be equal to this dictionary, and then I'm going to return this website. So I'm going to say here return and then website, which is my dictionary. Now if you save and head on over to the browser and refresh, it's going to return this dictionary, as you can see, website and then commoncode.com. So it worked. So now we know how to return a simple string, and also we know how to return a dictionary to the user. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Mustafa. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how you can return a web page, an HTML page, instead of just returning a simple string. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video. So let's get started. As you can see here, I have returned a simple dictionary, and this is not always useful, and this is not user-friendly. Users always want to look at amazing and well-designed web pages, HTML web pages. So how can we return an HTML page instead of just returning this dictionary? Well, it's very, very simple. You can basically say here return, and then you can return your HTML code, for example h1, and then h1, and then here in between you can type whatever you want. Let me say commoncode.com, and let me save, and let me head on over back to the browser. And as you can see, it returned here h1, the h1 tag that we have here. But this is not always useful, because suppose that you have a very, very long HTML page that you want to return, that contains, maybe it contains divs, maybe it contains here div, and then it contains maybe paragraphs and many things. It would be just painful to do that here, and your code is going to be super difficult to read, and it's just going to be a mess. Therefore, we can use what's called here, we can import what's called the render underscore template, which is a function that's going to return an HTML page. So we can use this render template here instead of returning this string, this HTML string. You can use render underscore template, and then pass the name of the template that you want to return. For example, index.html. But we don't have this index.html, right? We don't have this file. So we need to create this file, and we need to create it in our, obviously in our project here. You need to create first a new folder, and that folder must be named, it's a must, you must name it templates. You cannot name it anything else. It must be templates. And then inside that templates, you need to create this file, index.html. So inside this templates, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to name it index.html, and it must be inside the templates. And here you can type whatever HTML code you want. So you can type, for example, h1, and then I'm going to say here commoncode, and then I'm going to also type something else, paragraph tag. Let me just copy the same text, and also I'm going to say div, just to show you that it's going to work. Here commoncode, let me save, and let me also save this file, and let's run our application and head on over back to the browser. So as you can see, if you run your application and then if you head on over back to the browser and refresh, guess what? It's gonna return the HTML code that we have here, that we have in our HTML index.html, which is this code, h1 and then paragraph and then div. So it worked, and now we know how to return HTML, an HTML page, instead of returning just a simple HTML inside a string. And this is how it works in Flask. So that's it for this tutorial. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And don't forget to share and also like, and also don't forget to subscribe by clicking on the button down below this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.